Hi, I'm just sharing some information here in relation to this issue of homosexuality. And as somebody who has had direct communication with golden universal intelligence in the form of a golden light being event that revealed itself to me during April 1992 and transmitted the message of universal law of abundance and compassion through an energy of bliss. I've had 27 years to think about that, to explore what it really means, and to be able to articulate and to try and understand the dynamics and physics of it all, as well as explain the actual scientifically provable existence of our eternal soul in the form of our light being body that does inhabit our physical body and which does not perish at death. And that includes the spirit of consciousness in our mind, which is itself entirely the creation of quantum energy. So I'm really absolutely horrified actually at this continuing focus of attention of Christians, especially Christian groups, organised Christian groups, condemning homosexuality. And the very tacky method by which they make their complaints. There is a difference between depravity and perversity and genuinely intimate, caring, human friendships, the relationships, the partnerships that people have between each other, and the levels of commitment and loyalty and love that people benefit from within those partnerships. And I don't understand why Christians in particular are expressing such strong judgments against homosexuals and pointing homosexuality itself as an indication of the general decline in human consciousness. Homosexuals are not responsible for creating nuclear weapons. Homosexuals were not responsible for creating the antiquated Roman Church that usurped the message of Jesus after they'd killed large swathes of true Christians who followed Jesus. Most of them Jews actually, who'd accepted Jesus as a prophet of God and as a result were forced to flee from their homelands in Israel due to the levels of persecution that were issued against them after Jesus was allegedly brutally murdered by crucifixion by order of both the Roman state and the Judaic clergy of the day, who considered him a blasphemer. These judgments against homosexuals, as I've explained here, I've shared a comment here and I said, look, much as I support your channel, which I do because they do share some very interesting information and insights, and they are supporting Jesus, so I'm not a person who will throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I will point out which is the baby and which is bathwater, okay, which is what I'm doing here. So I've written here, much as I support your channel, it is disturbing the amount of judgmental attention followers of Jesus are focusing on homosexuals. Regardless of Israel's open approval of homosexuals, the human condition of homosexuality is not created by Zionists. As a gender group, homosexuals are not solely responsible for the terrible crimes being committed on our planet, and homosexuality itself is not condemned by Jesus, who asked his followers not to judge and to show patience, kindness and understanding to one another. Being educated in gender and psychology as well as history and sociology, I fully understand the historical dynamics that have led to an increase in homosexuality and there are numerous varying factors as to why individuals favour same-sex intimate relationships. Some of those factors relate to an individual's uncertain biology from birth, some to the fact a child is abused by a same-sex adult, or as a child victim of child sexual abuse with a member of the opposite sex. Drugs and media exposure also have an influence, as well as the unequal power balance between males and females. Some are left sexually turned off in face of intimately relating to another on a basic premise of inequality. The problems we face collectively, and which includes homosexuals, will be far better addressed by refraining from casting negative judgment on gender groups which merely add to a general xenophobia that only serves to further distract from the very real solutions to the very real problems we face. Present discourses among Christians are serving to alienate many genuinely good, kind and compassionate, law-abiding individuals who collectively provide a service to humanity as, e.g., doctors, surgeons, teachers, nurses, train drivers, pilots, carers, etc. The main problem at the core of all present-day issues is our collective attitude toward the child, a minor concern. And I've shared this video that I made recently titled A Minor Concern, which discusses child abuse, you know, the terrible crimes that are being committed by children, against children, and by largely heterosexual people. You know, the vast majority of child abusers are heterosexual people. When you look at child abusers in general, you will find they are a total mix of the social orders. You'll find people of every ethnicity, every faith, every colour, every gender. Okay? You'll find equally, you know, male and female. But when we look at the crimes being committed in this world generally, that we're all suffering from, you'll find actually it's the male gender, the heterosexual male gender, who's causing most damage. Who's causing most damage to women and children and our planet. It's heterosexual men. So shall we start condemning heterosexual men? Myself, as a survivor of 17 years child abuse, including rape by multiple heterosexual men, have I spent my life condemning men? No, I haven't. Instead, I've focused on the genuinely good men who were equally oppressed by the crimes committed by other males in their name, really, as males. And as far as I'm concerned, Jesus is a representative of the true human male. Jesus never called himself the Son of God. This is a fact. Jesus called himself the Son of Man, man being both male and female, as created by God, and obviously Goddess, because, as I've repeatedly stated, read it in Genesis. Are you going to dispute the fact that God said, let us create man, both male and female, in our own image, to be like us, and set them to tame the earth? So, you know, it doesn't take a mathematician to understand from that one sentence alone that God is both male and female, equally. And yet, strangely, these Christians of today, of the 21st century, oh, they're very keen to honour the Sabbath day, aren't they? We have only because of that God that is both male and female and created man, both male and female, to be like them, us. But at the same time, insisting on following as fact the story of Adam and Eve that was written as a parable to teach humanity how to be like God and how not to be like God, and the consequences of what happens when we behave foolishly, ignorantly, when we reach for a grab for power, when we show absolute disloyalty to our closest friend who'd done nothing but provide us with everything we need, kindness and love, but for the sake of power, the sake of the power to be like God, we will brush our prime carer and guide aside in order to be like God ourselves. Yes, yes, we're going to eat this fruit even though we've been told not to. You know, I understand the story of Eden. As I say, I've witnessed the light being, so everything is revealed to me. The seals are broken, there are no seals. But nobody wants to know. Nobody wants to know reality because nobody wants to be wrong. But everybody will be admonished. There is no getting away from that. We're all wrong. We've been living by a pack of lies for a very long time. And the prime one being that, you know, God sacrificed Jesus, his only son, in order to save mankind from sin. This is an absolutely despicable and abominable conclusion about Jesus' life. So you see, Christians don't like me. They find me offensive because I'm saying, look, Jesus said we're all children of God. He called his followers brother and sister. He taught us to pray to our Father. These are indisputable facts. 78 times he says in the New Testament, I am the Son of Man. Man being both male and female. He understood the scriptures. He understood what was wheat and chaff. And not anywhere can I see anything from Jesus that condemns same-sex partnerships. Nothing at all. What I see Jesus condemning is judgments and xenophobia and mystery beliefs. And instead it is disgusting to witness how Jesus himself now has been turned into a mystery faith that's based on mystery. This idea that God impregnated a virgin and then sacrificed that child as an adult in order to cleanse criminals from sin. No, what? This is the same God that asked Abraham not to kill his firstborn son. Okay? Now, people in the quotes below, in the thread below this video, heavily agreeing that yes, God said, you know, man shall not lie with man. Well, I'm sorry to inform you people, God did not write the Bible. Okay? If you're going to follow everything that's in the Bible, well, you better all get busy getting down to your local church to sacrifice goats, hadn't you? Because you can't cherry pick. It's this cherry picking that is so annoying and obnoxious and actually abominable that you'll pick on one thing but then you'll ignore other things. So, you know, if you're going to stand by what apparently God said in the original Testament, but you're going to ignore the fact that, well, if that was important, why didn't Jesus pick up on it then? Why didn't Jesus go around saying man shall not lie with a man? And all this condemnation of sexuality in the first place between male and female, that it's been turned into something evil and sinful. Even under marriage, a man has defiled himself if he's had sexual relations with a female, according to present interpretations of the message that Jesus came to deliver. Jesus came to deliver us the message of universal law of abundance in compassion, which was confirmed to myself through the light being, which nobody believes me. Nobody believes me. Why? Do they expect me to perform a miracle? My miracle, the miracle I deliver to humanity, is the fact that I survived the horror of my childhood, which was horror. I survived it well enough to be able to understand what is going on in this world and to actually offer some real, true guidance. But none of you want it, because none of you want to admit that you're wrong, and you want to cling to your actually evil judgments that are only making things worse. They're only making things worse. Why alienate homosexuals from Christianity? Did Jesus say homosexuals go away? Have we got anything, any evidence of that? No. God did not sacrifice his only son, okay? Who killed Jesus were people who did not like what Jesus was saying, because he was challenging the status quo and the mythical beliefs that had developed around Judaism by that time, when his land was under occupation by an invading, actually sadistic and misogynist power of Rome, which ultimately, after killing him, then usurped him as an individual to serve what is essentially a Luciferian cult. Everybody kneeling before an instrument of Roman torture while participating in mock ritual sacrifice, human sacrifice and cannibalism. It is absolutely disgusting. I understand the meaning of the Last Supper. I will give a very, very clear understanding of it here, right now, okay? When you understand the context of Jesus' times, when he was talking to his followers and he was sat round the table at the alleged Last Supper, what turned out to be the Last Supper. And he explained to them, for this Passover, we're not having lamb. We've got bread and wine. And everybody's there eating the bread, drinking the wine, his disciples. And then he explains to them, the wine is my blood and the bread is my body. And being Jews, every single one of his disciples immediately, apart from one, spat the bread out and spat the wine out, because it is against their faith to eat human flesh and drink human blood. And Jesus recognised the one that failed to do that as an imposter, as somebody who really has no faith in anything. So therefore a risk. But he explained to his followers that, yes, the reason why the wine is his blood and the bread is his body is because at that time the lands of Israel were under Roman control. They were growing plantations of wheat and grapes for wine that can be transported long distances to Rome, that were used to exchange with other nations as part of trade to get other goods. Like, for example, ironworks from the Europeans. That was one of the trades, the bargain. Yeah, we give you wine, you give us a load of ironworks, implements for gardening, for fighting, for this, for that. Israel had become a Roman plantation. That's what they did. Plantation. Farming. Jesus was born in Bethlehem purely because of the imposition of a Roman census that was imposed. Why? Because the Romans want to collect tax off every individual. People were pushed into abject poverty. You people still do not understand why Jesus whipped the money exchangers out of the temple. Before the Romans came, there were no such thing as money exchangers. There was no such thing as temple coins that people had to buy, exchange for with lambs and this and that. There was no such thing. That was a Roman imposition. That was in Rome. You had to buy special temple golden coins in order to go and pray to God. That was a Roman imposition. And that was why Jesus whipped them out of the temple, because people, the poor, no longer had access to God. Because they couldn't afford to buy these temple coins. They had nothing to exchange for these temple coins that then gave them access to go and pray to God. The whole of the Judaic faith had become nothing more than a money-making sham. And that's why Jesus himself was so outraged that, yes, he actually whipped the moneylenders out of the temple. And he took his followers, he said to them, look, forget that temple. You don't need to go and pray there in order to be cleansed of sin. Go and take yourself to a river and get baptized. Here, I can talk to you about God here on the mount, out in the open. The food that you've brought together isn't isn't for God, it's for you. Share it amongst yourselves, the feeding of the 5,000. It's time to wake up to the reality. These are the things that the light has explained to me, and this world is going to accept them or go to hell with your fantasy version of Jesus, which is nothing more than a Luciferian cult full of judgments and hate and inspiring hate. And all for what purpose? To avoid facing the real problems, the crime and criminals in power who have been in power for centuries. And the very first thing they did was take away the females' rights and judge our children as minor, unimportant human beings. Well, Jesus didn't judge a child as an unimportant human being, and neither did he judge women as unequal to himself. As he said when Martha, or was it Mary, was sat by his side learning, and Martha was saying, no, she's got to come in the kitchen and help. And he said, no, her place is here at my side, learning, education for women. Jesus was a revolutionary in the sense he did bring the light, the true golden light intelligence that came to me and I'm sharing now. And getting back to the Last Supper, that Last Supper was about Jesus explaining to his followers that, look, when you're eating produce that has been basically created through slavery, that produce is human flesh and blood. That's what it amounts to. But he explains to them that, look, until the time that we can defeat this, until humanity rises in its full force, nonetheless, I am blessing this produce for you to eat, because you are aware that you remain aware of the daily sacrifice, and you do not forget that, and you remain righteous, and you remain committed to ending that kind of slavery that essentially leaves us as cannibals. Because we are literally eating, benefiting from the suffering of humanity, the suffering of life, to provide our bread and our wine. And Jesus blessed it so that the people, his followers, wouldn't starve because they don't want to eat. They have no choice. We have no choice. We have to survive. We have to survive. We have to keep going. There, I've blessed it, but we recognise this is a sacrifice. As I recognise every time I buy fair trade drinks, coffee, whatever I can. But at the end of the day, I'm still aware that, look, whatever I have, somebody has made this. People have sat in factories and slaved and toiled. That we do not forget, and we ever strive forward to bring balance and harmony and righteousness. And pointing our fingers at various gender groups is not going to help. That's why the feminists don't like me. When I was doing gender studies, the feminist lecturers were absolutely, well, they were disgusted with me because, I refused to get on board with the general man-hatred that, yes, all men are evil, when I know they're not. Even despite the vast majority, according to my first 17 years of my life, I didn't actually know any man who represented Jesus. Most of the men, the vast majority I came into contact with, wanted to sexually abuse me. That was it. I was a thing. I was a toy. How did I connect to Jesus? Did my mum take me to Sunday school? No. Me and my cousins, we used to go of our own accord to Sunday school and learn about Jesus. And really, he was a mythical figure in a book. He would have been if it hadn't have been for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who, as a child in the 1960s growing up, there'd be often things on TV about Dr. Martin Luther King, and I remember as a young child hearing his speech on TV, I Have a Dream, and understanding the suffering that man was growing up. Myself at that time growing up in a multicultural community with my own cousins being targeted because their father was Jamaican and their mother was English. Okay, so I understood what racism was, and I'd witnessed the impact on my cousins. And I heard Martin Luther King, and I was absolutely Suddenly, it was him, it was through him that suddenly, yes, I knew that Jesus, who Jesus really was. Jesus was a righteous person, a person who stands up for people's rights, not some mythical character that, you know, God forces himself on a young virgin and then murders him to save everybody, which always seemed disgusting to me as a child. It's a very difficult thing to explain to a child that, oh no, Jesus had to be crucified. He had to be killed so dreadfully, you know, because he was God's son, and that's what God wanted. No, because what is happening on this earth is not God's will. And humanity itself is reflecting all the imbalances. And the worst imbalance is the psychosexual disease of pedophilia, that is called pedophilia. But actually, sadism, that's what it is, sadism. Inflicting harm and suffering on a child for one's own personal pleasure. It's sadism. And that's what we need to address. We need to arrest the sadists. And we need to do it with compassion as human beings. We need to do it lawfully. We need huge changes in this world. And we need to take, there's always one step first, isn't there? The first step. And the first step that we need to take is removing the criminal and illegal definition of a child as a minor human being. That is an abomination before this universe that created us, the universal intelligence. It is an abomination. And you know, it's only recently, because when I first came into contact with the universal intelligence and it was within me and it was surrounding me and there was no avoiding it, and I felt this immense wrath, and I thought it was against myself, and I suffered so dreadfully about that for years, and until I had to face what had happened to me. And it's such a long time before finally I realised that no, the universal intelligence isn't angry with you. The universal intelligence is outraged at what's happened to you. What's happened to you? And the fact that you did try to address the crime and criminals as a child from your childhood and everybody ignored you, and that you were left in your suffering, and that you have been judged and condemned and further abused because of your suffering. And meanwhile the criminals are all getting on scot-free and everybody's pandering to them. And Zionism, what Zionism? These people, they're not Zionists. True Zionists are Rastafarian. Are they even Jewish? I made a video it was a couple of years ago now, asking Jews to embrace Jesus as a prophet of God. I wasn't asking them to abandon their Judaic faith and all become Christians. No, not at all. I was saying that, look, Jesus, as a Jew, was a true prophet of God, of Yahweh, and really you do need to update your Torah and include him as a fellow Jew who came to assist and guide the Jews as a prophet of Yahweh. And you need to include him in your Torah and rescue him from the clutches of these people that really have no idea who Jesus is and are going around preaching a pack of lies about him. And even Revelations was written by who? Cerinthus, a Greek Gnostic, who falsely attributed them to St. John the Apostle. And when you read them, you can see, anybody can see, they're just a basic plagiarism of the original Testament prophecies, which is cherry-picked bits out and made his mishmash of a thing, which ultimately glorifies who? The bright and morning star, Lucifer, surrounded by his 144,000 probably paedophiles, because they've never defiled themselves with women. But they don't make it clear that they've never defiled themselves with children, do they? And there was quite a debate during the, what was it called, the Reformation, where the Rome suddenly decided that no, there had to be a particular official narrative about Jesus. and what was going to be included in the New Testament and what wasn't going to be included. So, you know, the book of Enoch gets cast out, and there was strong opposition to the inclusion of Revelations, but no, it was included, and we've lived with that evil, disgusting prophecy ever since. And what makes it even more disgusting, that people, Christians of today, are still hoping to satisfy that evil revelation, that terror, horror. What makes it even more disgusting is that those same people will refer to the Old Testament in order to justify their hatred of homosexuals, their xenophobic attention on homosexuals, okay, as a source of evil in our society. And yet at the same time, those same people have not even yet understood the story of Job and the story of Jonah. The story of Jonah, they have not understood. Jesus understood the story of Jonah, didn't he? That Jonah is literally forced by universal intelligence, God, to go and preach, to go and prophesy to the people of Nineveh about the terrible things that are going to happen to them. He gives a terrible prophecy, basically revelations, okay? And what do the people of Nineveh do? Do they all set about intent on fulfilling those horrible revelations, that horrible prophecy? No, they don't. They all immediately abandon their wicked ways, ask God for forgiveness, and that prophecy does not happen. And Jonah is very, very upset, because he said, well, basically, you know, you told me to go and prophesy, and now the prophecy hasn't happened, and you forced me to do that, God. And God explains to Jonah, but look, they changed. It didn't need to happen, did it? The prophecy didn't need to happen. The people have changed. But you people and Christians of today, you know, again, you're cherry picking things to feed your own hatred and xenophobia, but you don't want to know the truth. You don't want to accept you're wrong. Well, how are you ever going to be forgiven if you won't accept that you're wrong? Is anybody ever going to believe me? Well, you know, it's your choice, humanity. That is where we're at today. Okay, God isn't going to come and judge us. We judge ourselves. Make your judgments according to the facts and evidence. And I've just given you some very clear facts and evidence, and you will not get away from them. You can persecute me, you can judge me, you can do what you like to me, but it will not be by the universal intelligence that created us. It will not be by that will. And God's will is not ruling this earth. Everything that happens on this earth is not by the will of God, is it? I was not abused as a child by the will of God. The miracle that I survived is by the will of God. And like I say, hearing Martin Luther King Jr. as a child in that horrific household that was allegedly my home, it was like being in a concentration camp ruled by a madman. And hearing Martin Luther King, a man who'd survived such oppression, speak of such kindness, such generosity of spirit, such understanding, such faith and hope for the future, in spite of the oppression that he was facing, that there I found Jesus, there I found a true human being, and that is the Jesus I know. None of the preachers in the pulpits, what could they say to me? Me, a child who was being terribly, terribly abused at home by my own father. But Martin Luther King spoke to me, and that's the Jesus, that is where I found Jesus, the real, true human being, and what a real Christian is. They don't go around judging people. There are many, many homosexuals in this world who are doing wonderful, amazing, beautiful things, and how dare anybody throw that goodness away for the sake of the depraved individuals that are everywhere, that aren't unique or exclusive to any one gender, faith, nationality, or ethnic group. It is time to dissolve the divisions, because as Jesus said, there is only, you know, that he will divide the world. There is only one division in this world, and that's between those who will stand up for a child's rights and those who will not. Okay, that's the division. So I'm going to leave you again the link to this. Okay, I will leave you the link to my minor video about a minor concern, and I'll leave you a link to the video Supernatural or Not Yet. And it's up to you, humanity. You either listen to me and you change, you accept the guidance, or you don't. Enjoy your revelations, because I tell you something, all the good people, the genuinely good people who genuinely tried and strived to bring some love and light to this world, there's always going to be a planet in this universe for us, but planet killers will never be given another one, and you do face the eternal void, okay?